Claire Anderson's evenings were always the same. By 7, she would finish washing the dishes, wipe down the kitchen counter, and listen to the faint sound of wind through the maple trees outside her window. The quiet used to comfort her, but lately it had begun to feel heavy, too, still to hollow. 2 years had passed since her husband, Mark, died of a sudden heart attack. Time had moved on, but her heart still lingered in the space where his laughter used to be. The neighbors were kind, always offering help, but she rarely asked. She told herself she was fine. She had her garden, her books, her tea, yet deep down, she knew she was just passing the days that evening. As the sun dipped below the hills, a soft knock came at the back door. Claire dried her hands on a towel and opened it. Standing there, holding a small wooden box, was Ethan Miller, her neighbor's son. He was tall, with gentle blue eyes and a shy smile that looked both young and thoughtful. "Hi, Mrs. Anderson," he said politely. "Mom mentioned your fence might need fixing. I thought I'd take a look." Claire blinked, a little surprised. Ethan had grown up next door, but he'd been away for years. College, work, and then travel. She remembered him as the boy who used to mow lawns for pocket money, but now he was a man, confident yet soft-spoken. "Oh, that's kind of you," she replied with a small smile. "I didn't think your mom would send help so soon." He chuckled. "She didn't. I volunteered." Something about his tone made her pause. It wasn't obligation, it was sincerity. He wasn't doing this for his mother's sake. He wanted to be there. She stepped aside. "Come in for a moment before you start. I'll put the kettle on." Inside, the warm light from the kitchen lamp filled the space. Ethan took a seat at the table, looking around at the photos on the walls, memories of another time. "It hasn't changed much," he said softly. "Your house always felt cozy." Claire smiled faintly as she poured the tea. "That's what happens when you live somewhere long enough. The house becomes a part of you." As they sat together, the conversation flowed easily. He talked about his travels, the cities he'd seen, the people he'd met, but also how he missed the quiet of home. She listened, fascinated by how much he'd grown. He had a calm energy that filled the room without overpowering it. For the first time in months, she found herself laughing, really laughing at his small stories about getting lost on trains. Or learning to cook from YouTube. The teapot sat empty long after their cups had cooled. Time had slipped by unnoticed. The late sun had faded into the kind of golden dusk that made everything look softer, quieter. When Ethan stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. Almost as if he wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. "Thank you for the tea," he said instead. "It's been a while since I sat and talked like that." Claire smiled warmly. "It was nice having company." "You're welcome here anytime." He nodded, then glanced toward the backyard. "Maybe I'll start on that fence tomorrow if that's all right." She felt a small spark of warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "Of course. I'd appreciate it." After he left, Claire lingered by the window, watching him cross the yard toward his house. The porch light flickered on, illuminating his figure in the fading light. There was something steady about him, something that made her chest tighten unexpectedly. She told herself it was just gratitude, nothing more, but as she turned off the lights and headed to bed, her mind kept returning to that smile, to the way he had listened without judgment, without pity. That night, she dreamed of laughter in her kitchen, a sound she hadn't heard in years. The next morning came with a soft rain that painted the world in silver. Claire spent the morning reading by the window, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest. She wasn't sure why she cared whether Ethan came by or not. But every small sound outside made her glance toward the backyard. Around noon, she heard footsteps on the porch. "Knock, knock," came his voice, cheerful and familiar. She opened the door, pretending not to be waiting. "You didn't have to come in this weather," she said. He shrugged, water dripping from his jacket. "Rain never hurt anyone. Besides, I said I'd fix that fence." She couldn't help but smile. "You're too persistent. Or just bored," he teased lightly, setting down his tools as he worked. Claire made him coffee and watched from the kitchen window. He was focused, steady, moving with quiet purpose. The rhythmic sound of the hammer against the wood echoed through the yard like a heartbeat. It had been so long since she'd had someone around, someone filling the empty space with ordinary sounds and simple kindness. When he took a break, she brought him a towel and a mug. "You'll catch a cold," she scolded gently. He laughed. "You sound like my mom." "Well, someone has to keep you in line," she replied, trying to sound casual. Though her heart was lighter than it had been in months, they talked again, small talk. Laughter, shared memories of old neighborhood days. But under it all was something unspoken, a quiet connection that neither dared to name. When Ethan looked at her, there was no pity, no awkwardness about their age difference, just warmth and respect. By the time the rain stopped, the fence stood repaired, strong and neat. Claire looked at it with satisfaction. "You've done a wonderful job," she said. Ethan wiped his hands and smiled. "I had good company." For a brief second, their eyes met, and Claire felt something shift. Not romantic, not yet, but deeply human. Two lonely souls recognizing each other's quiet ache. He left soon after, promising to come by again to check on the paint. She watched him go, his figure fading into the drizzle. And she realized she was smiling without meaning to. That night, she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, watching the lights flicker in the miller's house next door. Somewhere inside, Ethan's laughter echoed faintly through the night air, mingling with the sound of crickets. Claire closed her eyes and listened, feeling the weight of loneliness ease just a little, and as the clock ticked softly in the background, she whispered to herself, maybe tomorrow won't feel so empty. For the first time since losing Mark, Claire felt that something or someone had gently opened a window in her heart again. She didn't know what it meant or where it would lead, but for now, it was enough that she wasn't entirely alone. The next morning, sunlight spilled across Claire's backyard, washing the wet grass in gold. The rain had passed, leaving the air fresh and clean. When Claire opened her curtains, she saw Ethan already outside, hammer in hand, fixing the last broken boards of the fence. She hadn't expected him so early. For a moment, she just watched the easy rhythm of his movements, the quiet focus on his face. Something about it made her smile without realizing it. She stepped outside, coffee mug in hand. "You're an early riser," she called out. Ethan turned, his grin easy and bright. "Old habit. I like to get things done before the world wakes up." Claire laughed softly. "You sound like my husband." He used to say the same thing. The mention of her late husband made the air still for a second. Ethan didn't look away. He nodded gently, his expression calm. "He must have been a good man," Claire said quietly. "The best kind." Ethan didn't say anything more, just gave a respectful nod and went back to work. She appreciated that. No awkward pity, no uncomfortable silence. Just quiet understanding. By noon, the fence looked almost new again. Ethan brushed off his hands and joined her on the porch, where she had set out lemonade and sandwiches. They ate together, the kind of easy lunch that felt like something two old friends would share. Claire found herself talking about things she hadn't said aloud in years, the way Mark used to hum while shaving. How they planted those maple trees together. How she missed hearing his footsteps in the hallway. Ethan listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his eyes kind but full of thought. When she finished, she sighed softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to talk so much." "Don't apologize," he said simply. "I like hearing about him. It's nice when someone's love still lingers in their stories." That struck her deeply. The way he said it, gentle, sincere, made her chest tighten. She smiled faintly, her voice low. "You're very wise for your age, Ethan," he chuckled. "Maybe I just listen more than I talk." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the wind rustling through the leaves, the creak of the new fence settling behind them. Claire felt an unfamiliar comfort. She realized she hadn't felt truly seen in a long time. Later, when Ethan started to gather his tools, he paused. "Mrs. Anderson, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she said. He hesitated, then looked at her earnestly. "Do you ever feel like life gave you more quiet than you wanted?" His words were so unexpected that she didn't answer right away. She studied his face, young, but with a certain weariness behind the smile. "Yes," she said finally. "Some days the quiet feels peaceful. Other days it feels like it's pressing down on me." "Why do you ask?" Ethan shrugged. eyes drifting toward the trees. I guess I've been feeling that too. I moved back home, but it doesn't feel like home anymore. Everything's changed. My friends are gone. My plans feel blurry. And sometimes I wonder if maybe I came back because I was just tired of being alone. Claire looked at him thoughtfully. She saw not just the young man next door, but someone who understood loneliness, not from lack of company, but from lack of connection. "You're not alone, Ethan," she said softly. "You just haven't found your new beginning yet." He turned to her, his voice quieter now. "Maybe, but lately, being here talking to you, it feels like I've found something real again." Her heart skipped a beat. The words weren't romantic, not directly, but there was a warmth beneath them that made her pulse quicken. She tried to keep her tone light. "You're kind to say that." But Ethan didn't laugh. He looked at her steadily. "It's not kindness. It's the truth." The world around them seemed to slow. The wind, the birds, even the ticking of the porch clock. For a brief second, their eyes met. And Claire felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years. Recognition, connection, maybe even longing. She quickly looked away, pretending to adjust her cup. "Thank you for helping with the fence," she said, her voice carefully steady. He smiled softly, sensing the shift. "You don't need to thank me. I like being here." Just then, his phone buzzed. He glanced down, his expression changing. "That's Mom. She's asking about dinner." Claire nodded, relieved and disappointed all at once. "You should go. You've done enough for one day." He gathered his tools, but before stepping off the porch, he turned back to her. "Can I come by tomorrow? There's a part of the gate that still needs fixing." She nodded, though her voice came out faint. "Of course. Whenever you like." After he left, Claire sat for a long while, staring at the repaired fence. It was perfect, solid, and straight. No cracks left to mend. But inside her, something else had cracked open instead. She hadn't expected it. It wasn't attraction, not yet, but it was something dangerous. The awareness of being seen again. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard his voice saying, "You make me feel like I found something real again." The words echoed in her chest like a song she couldn't forget. She told herself it was just kindness, a young man showing compassion to a neighbor, but deep down, she knew it had felt different the next morning. She tried to distract herself, gardening, reading, cleaning, but everything reminded her of their conversation. She found herself making extra coffee, setting aside an extra mug without thinking. When the clock struck noon, she almost expected to hear a knock at the door. When it finally came, her heart jumped. Ethan stood there again, holding paint cans. "Told you I'd finish the job," he said with a grin. Claire laughed softly, the tension easing. "You're a man of your word." They worked side by side that afternoon, painting, chatting, sharing small stories about their lives. She learned he had once wanted to be a teacher, but had changed paths. He learned she loved gardening because it made her feel alive again. The more they spoke, the easier it became. As if they'd known each other for years. When the work was done, they sat on the steps again, watching the paint dry. The late sun bathed everything in a soft glow. Ethan leaned back, arms resting on his knees, and said quietly, You remind me of someone who doesn't realize how strong she is." Claire blinked, caught off guard. "And how would you know that?" He smiled, eyes gentle. "Because I've seen you smile through pain. People who do that, they carry more courage than they admit." The words hit her deeply. She didn't reply, she couldn't. For a long moment, they sat in silence. The air between them filled with something unspoken but unmistakable. When he finally stood to leave, he said softly, "See you tomorrow." She nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, tomorrow." And as he walked away, Claire realized her heart was no longer just quiet. It was awake. The next few days unfolded like quiet waves. Ethan stopped by every afternoon, always with a small reason to check the fence, fix a light, or bring over some tools. But both of them knew it wasn't really about repairs anymore. It was about the comfort of being seen, about finding peace in each other's company. Claire told herself it was harmless, just friendly talk. But every time he smiled at her or asked how her day was, She felt something stir inside, something gentle yet powerful. One evening, as the sun slipped low and the sky turned a soft orange, Ethan came by again. "Fence looks perfect," he said with a grin. "But I thought I'd check if you needed help with the porch light." Claire smiled knowingly. "It's been working fine since last time. Just like finding reasons to come over," he laughed. "You caught me. But it's a good excuse to see how you're doing." She shook her head, pretending to be stern, though her heart warmed. "You're impossible." He stood on the porch, screwdriver in hand, pretending to examine the light while they talked. The air felt calm, the kind of evening where the world slowed down just enough to let thoughts breathe. Claire noticed the way the light caught in his hair, the easy grace of his movements, and quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own attention. Ethan glanced at her. "You've been quiet today. Everything okay?" She nodded, sipping her tea. "Just thinking. It's been a long time since someone filled this house with laughter again." He smiled softly. "I'm glad I could bring some of that back." His words hung in the air, simple but heavy. Claire's chest tightened. She wasn't used to kindness spoken so freely. "You have," she said quietly. "More than you know." A soft breeze brushed through, carrying the scent of rain from far away. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was full, alive with everything they didn't say out loud. Ethan finally broke it. "You ever feel like time tricks you?" She looked at him curiously. "How do you mean?" He sat down on the porch step, eyes distant. "Like you wake up one day and realize years passed while you were waiting for life to start again. And suddenly, you don't even remember what you were waiting for." His voice had a quiet sadness that made her heart ache. "Yes," she said after a pause. "That's exactly how it feels. You lose yourself in the waiting." He looked up at her, eyes warm but searching. "And what do you do then?" Claire thought for a moment. "You stop waiting. You start noticing. The sky, the people, the small things. You stop planning what happiness should look like and start feeling what's already around you." Ethan smiled faintly. "That sounds like something you learned the hard way." "I did," she admitted. "But maybe that's how all real lessons come." They sat in the fading light, talking about nothing and everything about his college days, her favorite books, the neighbors' funny habits. It felt natural, like time itself had slowed to listen. Claire hadn't realized how easy it had become to share space with him as the sun dipped below the trees. A sudden rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. The first drops of rain began to fall. Ethan stood quickly. "You should head inside before it pours." Claire shook her head with a smile. "I don't mind the rain," he laughed softly. "You'll catch a cold." Maybe I'll let it," she teased. A hint of mischief she hadn't felt in years. The rain came heavier, drumming against the porch roof. Ethan stepped closer to avoid getting soaked. For a second, they were standing only a few feet apart, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. Neither of them moved. Claire looked up at him, her voice calm but tender. "You should go home before it gets worse." He didn't move. His gaze lingered on her face, on the quiet strength she carried. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "I don't want to go yet." Her breath caught. The words were simple, but they reached somewhere deep inside her. She searched his eyes for something reckless or uncertain, but all she found was sincerity. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. "Ethan," she said gently, "you're young. Don't let loneliness confuse you. Sometimes it makes us see things that aren't there." He shook his head. "No, I see it clearly. You make me feel grounded, like I'm not just drifting anymore." Her heart raced, not from his words, but from the truth in them. She turned slightly, looking at the rain beyond the porch. "You don't know what you're saying," she murmured. "Yes, I do," he said softly. "Maybe it's not what you expect, but it's real to me." Claire felt the weight of every heartbeat. She wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away, to not make her remember what longing felt like. But she couldn't because part of her didn't want to. For years, she'd been frozen in quiet grief. And now, in this moment, she felt alive again, terrified, but alive. The rain softened, turning into a light drizzle. Claire finally spoke, her voice steady but kind. "Ethan, you've brought light back into my days. But don't mistake that for something it's not. You're searching for meaning, and I'm just someone who reminded you it still exists." He nodded slowly, though his eyes stayed on her. Maybe you're someone I was meant to find." Her chest tightened again. She stood, forcing a small smile. "Go home, Ethan. It's late." He hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." He turned to leave, stepping into the damp evening, but before he walked away, he said softly, "You think about what I said. I'll see you tomorrow." She watched him go, her heart heavy and confused. When she closed the door, she leaned against it, trying to calm the storm inside her. She knew it was wrong to feel this way, not because of age or appearances, but because she'd promised herself never to open her heart again. Yet here she was, shaken by a simple confession that had felt more honest than anything she'd heard in years. That night she couldn't sleep. The rain tapped gently on her window like an echo of his words. She sat by the glass, watching the streetlights shimmer through the puddles, thinking about the look in his eyes, not youthful recklessness, but real warmth. For the first time in a long while, Claire realized she was afraid not of loss, but of hope. Hope that maybe, after everything, she could still feel something real. And somewhere down the street, Ethan lay awake too, thinking of her. Both of them caught between what was right and what their hearts whispered quietly in the dark. Tomorrow, they both knew, would change everything. The next morning, Claire woke to pale sunlight filtering through her curtains. She hadn't slept much. Her thoughts had been chasing themselves all night. Ethan's words, his voice, the look in his eyes. She wanted to believe it was just a moment of emotion, something he'd forget by morning. But her heart knew better. What he said had come from somewhere real, and it frightened her more than she cared to admit. She moved through her morning quietly, making coffee, watering the plants, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind quiet. But every sound in the house felt louder without him, there the ticking clock, the hum of the refrigerator, even the wind against the windows. She had spent years getting used to silence. Yet now, after Ethan, it suddenly felt heavier by noon. She was standing by her kitchen window, watching the rain-soaked street glisten in the sun. Across the yard, Ethan's house looked peaceful. She wondered if he was thinking about last night's tour, if he'd already realized it was just a passing feeling. Maybe he'd move on, like most people do, and she could return to her quiet life again. But around 2 in the afternoon, there was a soft knock on her door. Her chest tightened. She didn't have to guess who it was. When she opened it, Ethan stood there, holding a paper bag and a shy smile. "I made lunch," he said simply. "Thought maybe we could eat together." Claire stared at him for a moment, torn between wanting to say yes and knowing she shouldn't. But his smile, the same one that had brought warmth back into her home, broke through her hesitation. "Come in," she said quietly. He unpacked sandwiches and coffee, placing them neatly on the table. It felt ordinary, yet nothing about it was. They ate in near silence, both pretending it was just another afternoon, though the air between them carried everything they weren't saying. After a while, Ethan looked up. "About last night, Ethan," Claire interrupted softly. "You don't have to explain. I understand." But he shook his head. "No, I do. I've been thinking all night. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. I just needed to tell you what I felt. You've been kind, patient, and honest with me. I didn't realize how much that mattered until I met you." His words were calm, sincere, without a hint of pressure. Claire listened quietly, fingers wrapped around her mug. "You're kind, Ethan," she said gently. "But this can't be anything more than friendship. People wouldn't understand, and maybe neither would we." He nodded slowly. "I know. I'm not asking for anything. I just don't want you to push me away because of what others might think." Claire's throat tightened. "You deserve someone your age. Someone who can give you a future, not memories." He smiled sadly. "Maybe, but not everyone finds peace in the same place. You've given me something I didn't know I needed: quiet understanding. That means more to me than you realize." She wanted to tell him how much his presence had healed something broken inside her, but she couldn't find the words. Instead, she looked at him with soft eyes and whispered, "You've given me something too. You made me remember what it feels like to be seen again." They sat in silence, the kind that said everything without sound. Then Ethan stood, walked to the window, and looked outside. "You always said the garden reminds you of your husband," he said quietly. "Maybe now it can remind you of something new, like how strong you've become." His words hit deeper than she expected. He turned back to her and smiled faintly. "I think it's time I go, Claire. I'll be gone for a while. My friend offered me a job upstate." The news caught her off guard. "When tomorrow morning?" he said softly. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you, but you deserve to know." She nodded, trying to stay composed, though a sharp ache rose in her chest. "That's good," she said, forcing a smile. "You should go. You're young and the world's waiting for you." He studied her face for a long moment, memorizing every line, every quiet strength. "You'll miss me a little," he said with a half smile. "It's trying to lighten the mood." She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "More than a little." He reached out, not to hold her, but to brush a strand of hair from her face, a gesture so gentle it left her breathless. "Then all right," he said. That night, Claire sat alone by her window, watching the lights across the street. For the first time in years, she cried not out of sadness, but out of something softer. Something that felt almost like gratitude. He had walked into her quiet world, stirred her heart, and reminded her she was still capable of feeling deeply. When she went to bed, she found something on her pillow. A folded note written in Ethan's neat handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It read, "Claire, thank you for showing me what real kindness looks like. You taught me that love doesn't always mean staying it, means caring enough to let go. You'll always have a place in my story, even if it's just in memory." Her eyes filled with tears as she read the words again and again. It wasn't a goodbye filled with regret, was one filled with respect, warmth, and quiet affection. She pressed the note to her chest, whispering into the darkness, "Goodbye, Ethan." Months passed. The garden bloomed again, brighter than ever. Life returned to its calm rhythm, though now it carried a new kind of peace. Some mornings, Claire would catch herself glancing toward the empty house next door, half expecting to see him leaning on the fence with that easy grin. One day, as she was tending the roses, the mail carrier stopped by. "Package for you," he said. She opened it to find a small framed photograph, a picture of the lake near his new job, sunlight dancing on the water. Below it, a note, "Still thinking of quiet mornings and strong coffee. Hope the garden's still beautiful. Ethan." Claire smiled through her tears. She placed the photo on her kitchen table next to a cup of tea. The ache she once feared had softened into something beautiful, something she could carry without pain. That evening, as the sun set behind the trees, Claire whispered to herself, "Maybe love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's just about being grateful you felt it at all." And for the first time in years, she felt truly at peace. The past no longer haunted her, and the future no longer frightened her. Ethan had reminded her that life still had surprises left, even when she thought her story was already written. As twilight settled, Claire looked out toward the horizon, her heart calm, her eyes warm. Somewhere she hoped Ethan was looking at the same sky, smiling too, because even though they had parted, their kindness and care had become something timeless, something that lived quietly between them, carried gently by memory, and that was enough.